So, one third of gradient. How has the coronavirus been treating you?
Actually, one third of gradient. I have been staying home and practicing a safe social distancing.
As you should.
How about you, one third of gradient?
Similarly to one third of gradient, I've also been staying
Okay,
safe.
hold on. I think you meant me, one third of gradient. Okay, let's get that clear.
Oh, wait. I think he was talking about me, one third of gradient. Isn't that right, one third of gradient?
Sorry, one third of gradient. I was talking to one third of gradient. My mistake, one third of gradient.
Okay, regardless, we're three thirds of gradient, and this is the first episode of the Gradient Podcast.
Aside from Diversity Dive Deep, Inclusion Works, Innovation for All, Build Me Up, Instant Impact, and Advancing Diversity podcast, we are the only podcast built on diversity.
I'm Gene.
I'm Arman.
And I'm Evan, and we are here to talk to you about some current events, politics, and hip stuff for the kids.
Today, we are talking to you about the infamous COVID-19, a more pressing challenge society faces every single day.
I think we definitely need to first start on talking about the hysteria and panic caused by the coronavirus because you have people out here doing really crazy things. The
Mhm.
Harvard Medical Journal actually recently published an article that talked about people were drinking oregano oil to try and fight their coronavirus. People were drinking bleach and snorting cocaine. Like, what do you guys think about this?
Well, my first thought is that someone in the Harvard Medical Center had to try doing this to confirm the fact that it doesn't cure COVID-19.
I mean, you got to
What
do what you got
about
to
you,
do.
Evan?
Yeah, I for one, I'm looking forward to the report that goes out on all of the tests they did to ensure that these aren't the right things to do. But I think it's important to keep in mind that when looking into COVID-19, the coronavirus, and finding possible things you can do to aid against getting infected, it's important to keep in mind what is and what isn't misinformation.
I think this new age of social media definitely things like TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, it allows this misinformation to be more rampant and people are allowed to take their crazy ideas and just kind of impose them on other people.
I believe that people or society thinks of all these different ideas that they hope can combat COVID-19 in offense to try and combat hysteria.
Mhm. That is sort of that double-edged sword of social media where we can, one, get information faster and spread it easier, but we can also get misinformation easier as well.
Absolutely. For reliable information, just so everyone knows, don't trust everything you hear on social media. Like, we can't stress this enough. For the most reliable information, you can visit cdc.gov to get updated and current information about the coronavirus.
Or you can contact your local city or city government or health officials. I'm sure they would be happy to give you some very real information on how to keep yourself safe from COVID-19 and assure the best possible self-quarantine routes that you can take.
Absolutely. Um, let's talk about toilet paper because people are doing some crazy things with toilet paper.
Mhm.
Yes, people have been hoarding on hundreds of rolls at a time, hoping that for some reason toilet paper is the cure for coronavirus. I'm sure Harvard Medical Center had a blast disproving this theory.
All right. Uh, it's pretty clear to see that a lot of people are definitely panicking and are very worried about the coronavirus as a threat. But of course, you have to make sure that what you're doing is reasonable and makes sense in the long term, because there are already people who had stocked up on toilet paper and now have to return it because they have way too much and can't keep track of it anymore.
If you need 144 rolls of toilet paper for a 14-day quarantine, you probably needed to see a doctor way before the coronavirus even started. I think even online, we talked about social media, there's so many memes going around, and some of them are pretty funny, but they just sort of give in to spreading false information.
Right. It is important to have a distinction between what is meme and what is truth. It's always, sometimes it is fun to just joke around about the coronavirus, but it is important to know what is truth and what is misinformation.
And you have to make sure that's clear, because in a society where meme culture has becoming more mainstream, it's very hard to differentiate what you think can be true, or what do you think people are memeing about?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that goes to play because of, again, TikTok or all these other social networks that people like to spread falsified information on. There's a study that said there's a lot of uncertainty and falsified information of going around about an impending doom. So we believe that people stock up on all these items because it makes them feel that they have a little more control over what's happening in their lives. And it's like the least bit of things they can do to feel prepared in the face of a pandemic.
At the end of the day, just to anyone watching, know that drinking bleach will not cure the coronavirus.
Yes, but washing your hands and keeping a safe 6 feet at least social distance from other peers will make an impact on whether or not you contract the coronavirus.
You can go to the store when you need things, not when you just want a Twix.
Yeah, and I've noticed that a lot of these stores in like Target or Walmart or any of these mainstream stores, what they're doing is they're putting stickers between lines where people have that are 6 feet apart, so people know where to stand and what is a safe social distance so they can keep away from themselves or keep away from each other.
I think that's definitely a good thing because you can't trust people to do the right thing at all times. And when a higher being or a higher, company is forcing people to do the right thing, where people are required to wear masks, where people are, in a sense, required to stay this 6 feet apart, it definitely is going to help. As I say,
you have to realize that the peak of amount of coronavirus cases, in fact, they hit 2 million today. There's no sign of a clear stop on when social distancing will end. So as long as it seems like that we have to keep far away from each other for an uncertain amount of time, people will eventually have to go to all these mainstream places like a store or a gas station or anywhere that they need to. And I think it's very positive thing what these stores are doing, where they're keeping all these stickers to keep people safe, even though they are essential. They need to go there eventually.
Absolutely.
And Harvard has reported that this social distancing quarantine may last until 2021 or even further into the future.
Yeah, we just got to make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's why it is so important to keep that social distance and to wash your hands, because we want to get this whole quarantine thing is over as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. We want to make sure that this quarantine doesn't last long. We stay at home. We effectively social distance.
You have to remember, and something that Yale Medicine also noted about, is that the point of social distancing is not just to keep ourselves healthy, but to avoiding a disaster in the space our national hospitals have, and to help many of our healthcare workers who are at the front line of treating people with all this virus. And in doing so, we'd allow them to have like a lesser chance of getting this virus by practicing the social distancing.
Stay at home. It's the right thing. Help yourself, help others. Do what the officials say.
Mm-hmm. All of this quarantine and social distancing has really put into perspective how important jobs like nurses and doctors and essential workers are, and how for granted we take those positions in our society.
Absolutely.
I think COVID-19 specialist Dr. Choi said it best by saying, being responsible with social distancing means you have to consistently do all the things we've been asking you to do as medical professionals. Wash your hands, cover your face when you sneeze, and practice the diligent 6 feet apart from each other.
Quarantine is going to be difficult. It's going to be boring at times. And that's why we here at Gradient Podcast have some things that you can do during quarantine. You can learn a new language.
You could read a book.
Practice an instrument.
You could practice a sport.
You can learn a new skill.
Try and see if you can fit in your fridge.
You can get a grocery store clerk to sell you one grape.
You can balance your light switch between on and off.
You can try and eat a whole plate of spaghetti with just a spoon.
You can attempt to eat a taco while looking sexy.
You can mow your cactus.
Now, all of these are, of course, incredibly valid and responsible ways of spending time during quarantine and developing yourself as a person.
Out of all, I think the best thing you can do during quarantine is watch the Gradient Podcast. But for some people, they may not have time to watch the Gradient Podcast because they do have school. It's not the traditional school we're used to, but it's this online school. And I think it's really interesting how students and teachers have adapted to this new way of learning?
From interviewing my teacher, actually, she told me that she hopes upon halting social distancing, students would be more appreciative of having a face-to-face teacher discussion, giving them better directions and a better path to success in their studies. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's something that as students, we honestly, me as well, and I'm sure the rest of us lack. And I hope social distancing can teach us this.
Yeah. Once again, we do take for granted some of these positions like teaching and going to school every day. So,
Medical
uh,
workers too, we take
of
them for
course.
granted.
So, being appreciative of how much they put into their entire lives of coming to school every day and teaching the next generation, it's really important. And I hope that outside of once this ends, we can become more appreciative of these positions in our society.
They're so important. I think this transition from a physical school to an online school definitely has its pros and cons. Like, people are allowed to work at their own pace, people are allowed to take time to do different things when they want to do different things. But at the same time, one can argue that conventional learning is easier and better for students than this new online classroom.
Yeah.
I, for one, have been finding it difficult to keep a steady schedule, which is very important when you're doing personal work and doing and setting your own pace. As someone who struggles with a sleep schedule, I found it difficult to keep a steady pace when it comes to doing work and stuff like that.
You really
I
have
think
to set a schedule for yourself, from doing the work you need to do when you want to do it, making sure everything's due on time, sitting in your fridge, all that kind of stuff. You just want to make sure that you're in control now. You want to make sure that you stay on task.
I would contend that even especially for high schoolers, this own schedule like stuff that we're doing for school is a good practice for what's going to happen to us at college, because a lot of times we're going to have a non like 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. schedule for school all the time. We're going to have classes at different times. We're going to have to work on our own schedules. And I guess one of the pros to this is it could be a good practice for us doing so and getting into those habits.
As good as this new system is for preparing us for college, there are still people who are going to abuse the system.
Yes, personally, a lot of people have been um, abusing their individualism in their Zoom classes. In fact, I didn't even know that there were that many bendovers in my class for math.
Yeah, and it's important to also mention how easy it is now for students to be to cheat and be fraudulent on their exams now that they're not in class and in person.
I think it's a sort of a trade-off for you get to be more of an individual and use your time the way you want to, and that's good for students, but at the same time it's hurting teachers because students aren't going to get the same learning experience. There are so many ways that is different in which a student benefits from this new system at the expense of their learning that I think it's really important.
Hmm. I, for one, have already had other students in my classes that have been caught cheating on tests and quizzes, and it's caused an issue of both trust from the teachers and how much work is going to be put into getting this online learning to work out well.
I think equally as important is a teacher's ability to adapt, whether or not they can make you do band online, PE online, is really just up to the teacher and how well they choose to take this new environment.
And the new responsibility of having to host your whole class on a virtual platform really could benefit teachers by allowing them to be more well versed in new technologies and new things that will be implemented into the school system as years come. This could act this year, the rest of this year, may even be recognized as like a technology training year per se, for all these teachers to get a new grip on a whole new learning tactic that is like computers and stuff.
In the future, 100%, like, teachers being able to do this can definitely set a path for how learning can be done in the future.
And not only in the future of learning, but you have to realize like all these hygienic and social distancing things that are being incorporated into everyday life. How do you think that implement like regular life after coronavirus?
Um, I think it's definitely would definitely have a larger focus on both hygiene and keeping clean and washing your hands, but also on government preparedness for pandemics such as this.
Life, I don't think life is going to go back to this normal that we used to live in. Everyone's it's going to be different. People are going to realize that you can't take things for granted anymore, because just like that, things can change. We need to just try and be as safe and as practical as we can all the time.
So do you still think after the CDC says it's safe to not practice social distancing anymore, people would still be wearing masks or more different like protective gear?
I think masks specifically are going to go on for a little bit longer than social distancing expires. Um, After a while, I think it will go away, but to begin with, people are definitely not going to take the end of social distancing, for face value.
Mhm. None of us are clairvoyant. We can't tell the future. But I do think that after the dust settles and the CDC says that it's okay to stop social distancing and go back to what we would call normal, I do think there's going to be plenty of people who are going to still be precautious and make sure that what they're doing is more than enough to prevent any further diseases from spreading like this.
Absolutely. Overall, I mean, social distancing, there's no other way to put it than it's an experience, right? We're all
Yeah.
going through the same thing, and we're all experiencing it together. So it's just, I think it creates a newfound unity within people, but at the same time, we all need to realize that the only way that this can get better is if we work together, and if we all stay safe, stay home, and practice these effective social distancing methods.
I'd like to point out that it's ironic that you said a newfound unity has been created by safe social distancing, by the fact that we aren't able to unite in a physical perspective. And speaking of things that are ironic, did you know that the Mexican beer brand Corona has just been halting its manufacturing systems because of Corona?
That
Is that so?
Is that so? And I think that can bring us into a new hearth of discussion, speaking that we've spoken about online schooling and a social aspect of social distancing, but we haven't really spoken about the business landscape.
businesses are struggling. There's no other way to put it. I mean, there are so many American workers, American restaurant owners and employers and employees all over the globe that have either been laid off, don't have a job, are paid less, their hours are cut. It's a lot to go through, and it's definitely going to take a long time for us to try and rebuild things back to the way they were.
It's clear to anyone that's been following the economic response to the coronavirus that there's definitely been a recession that has occurred due to the effects of the coronavirus, and recovering from that is going to be a very important step when it comes to the future of our economy and our society as a whole.
Armand, I think that's really interesting that you brought this up. Like, how anything you've noticed specifically from the economy or businesses that have been closed?
Personally, I haven't looked into as much of statistics, but just in general, by going around my city and driving through, I've been able to view that there are very little business affairs going on in between restaurants and drive-throughs and much of anything really. And it's very interesting to see how these essential workers who have to stay open, how they're managing to do so, and also how businesses of non-essential are expected to make rent.
Yeah, we can't take before we said we can't take these healthcare workers, essential workers, we have to appreciate them more. But I think we need to appreciate all people who work and try to contribute to our economy, work and try to contribute to their own livelihood.
It's clear that the businesses that are most affected by the coronavirus are those small businesses, especially those in the hospitality industry, like restaurants and hotels, that are really are really going to have a big negative impact on their future.
And speaking about this whole essential and healthcare worker, so what I've recently encountered is that many cities across the country, they've investing in this new quick blood test for COVID-19, where specifically essential workers have been blood pricked, and then this test, it gives them a 15-minute diagnosis of COVID-19. It's not as accurate. If you test positive, it is very important to have a follow-up examination by a thorough throat swab. But this test allows essential workers to quickly have a diagnosis so that they can treat other patients or possible patients of COVID-19 without accidentally spreading the disease in attempts to combat it.
Mm-hmm. My only issue with that personally is that sacrificing accuracy for efficiency could lead to issues because on a personal note, I had a family friend of mine that it took 3 tests in order to finally diagnose them as positive for coronavirus. So when we sacrifice accuracy for efficiency, it could lead to issues where people aren't taking the measures that they need to when it comes to social distancing and quarantining themselves if they aren't getting the tests that are accurate as possible.
Well, you have to think in logistics of the greater good aspect where essential workers who have to treat patients like as much as possible, where they can't manage the wait of like 7 to 10 days of getting a very accurate response for coronavirus, where a lot of these patients who more than likely have it than them, they aren't going to be able to treat without properly being tested, or else they may accidentally cause more of a problem than they're trying to help. And I think that's what the purpose of this test is. And I understand 100% sure that accuracy is very important, but you have to think about how these essential workers are supposed to treat as many people as possible.
With all that said, don't forget to stay clean, stay home, stay safe, vibe. Remember to follow us on Twitter at Gradient Podcast, on Instagram at Gradient Podcast. New episodes coming out soon. I'm Jaden.
I'm Arman.
And I'm Evan.
We're Gradient signing off. Thanks for watching.